Welcome to the Time of the Reason podcast show. We're not looking for ratings. We are not here to support and to create sensationalism. We are not here to entertain. We are here to give due diligence to the pressing human, economic, environmental, political, and social issues that affect humankind. We are here to promote thinking. Now, more than ever, is the time to revive reason. Unless we do so, humankind is riding a one-way runaway train into oblivion. Think about it. We must think. Thank you for listening again to another episode of the Time of the Reason podcast show. Let's get started. Hey, Dan. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, John.
Want to welcome everybody back to another episode of the Time of the Reason podcast show. I'm here with Dan Ploger, my cohort, in conversation that sparks critical thinking and incites you to use logic and reason. And the subject today is something that everybody's looking at. It seems like, of course, by now everybody knows that Hamas invaded the state of Israel on October 7th. It was debauchery, it was humiliation, it was outright murder. It was the grossest thing that the world has seen in a while, and the largest mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust. Some people even believe the Holocaust didn't happen. Now, how has that happened in this day and age? But so Israel retaliates, defends its sovereignty, goes in after Hamas with one mission in mind: to destroy it, of course, in the Gaza Strip, which is Palestinian primarily. And then some hostages were released in a ceasefire, thank goodness, and there's still some hostages in there. Once the ceasefire, it wasn't really a ceasefire, it was a pause in hostilities. They went back in and they're going after them hard to get these hostages and to destroy Hamas. Okay, meanwhile, all over America, all over the world, there's these pro-Palestinian protests going on, and anti-Semitism, which reminds me, of course, I wasn't alive at the time, but reminds me of the Kristallnacht, where the Nazis in Germany went in and just destroyed all these Jewish businesses prior to World War II. But, unprecedented. And all across America, Great Britain, Canada, and the Arab countries was this outpouring of support for Hamas, the Palestinians, and of course, a lot of hatred towards the Jews, the oppressors. So last week, 3 heads of 3 major Ivy League universities were called to the U.S. Congress to answer some questions. And these 3 women, one of them's gone now, thank goodness, but these 3 women who were the heads of 3 prestigious universities, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the University of Pennsylvania, and Harvard University, 3 elite Ivy League schools, could not answer the question if From the River to the Sea called for the genocide of the Jews. Not a single one of those leaders at their prestigious universities could answer that question. And it would be a no, that it should not, that those kinds of activities on college campuses that are extremely anti-Semitism and call for violence and genocide have no place on any college campus anywhere. Now, we call it the Poison Ivy League, or Marxists running the show, and we've got some other logos behind us on the screen, and we're not calling out any of these universities, but we'd like them to look at their policies and their procedures to see if perhaps there's some changes that need to be made. Of course, Jewish students have not felt safe. There's been an uptick over 300% crimes against Jews across America and elsewhere. And now Congress is looking into how many hundreds of millions of dollars are given to these prestigious universities to promote anti-Semitism. And it's there. They can deny it all they want. You only know what you see. And when people are screaming and yelling intifada and From the River to the Sea, these people know what this is. Why is the American taxpayers, why are they using our money to promote this? And again, the question is, are Marxists running the show? And I'll come right out and say it, and I'll answer it. Yes, Marxists are running the show. How does this happen in the United States of America in the 21st century? How do we allow Marxists, and Dan, this is going to go it's right into the conversation, but how do we allow Marxists to run our universities? How does that happen?
Well, it happens by not paying close enough attention to our Department of Education and the teachers union. That's the origin of the seed. And anytime I start hearing talk of categorizing people into oppressor or oppressed, that's the trademark of Karl Marx, one of the most reviled, I think, philosophers of modern age. He offered nothing. He was nothing more than a theorist uh, who came up with an idea. He didn't practice any of his beliefs because if he would have seen what a horrible failure those beliefs would have been, and what a horrible failure he would have been. But it is the popular thing right now to badmouth the concept of capitalism. And of course, this is these are words right out of Karl Marx's mouth, it's the idea of equity which is another Karl Marx concept, not equal opportunity, but equity, which means equal in outcomes. And all the time, the Karl Marx supporters are in the belief that, well, if I support the oppressed, I'm on the right side. And the capitalism is blind to the plight of the people who cannot excel or even survive in a capitalistic society where they as individuals are expected to contribute more than they produce. So in any event, I guess that's a long-winded, I don't know.
No, but let's take a look at that. Capitalism. If we look at this, socialism and communism and capitalism, let's say, and then hybrids thereof. And if you look at what capitalism has given to the world, I mean, the list of innovations and creations and inventions it's volumes of what capitalism and the incentive to get rewarded for the work that you put into the society. It's incredible what capitalism has given to the world. But when you look at socialism and communism, what you see over time is you see increased poverty. You see a real division between the classes. Virtually, you see no middle class. And if you do, it's all black market. You see poor economic output over a period of time. And then what you basically end up with is a power base of elites that have sponged off the system, and then everybody else. And everybody else is in a battle for survival. So it sounds romantic, socialism, and everything's free and government's going to take care of us and yada, yada, yada. But in reality, that is a one-way ticket to a societal destruction, cultural decline, and nothing good for we the people. And I got to tell you, man, at 64 years old, Dan, to see the level of anti-Semitism and all of these late teens and early 20 somethings being goaded by people that know better to do these kinds of things and to show this hatred is just beyond words. I'm like you just said, long-winded answer to what? And it's like, I don't know. I think it's complex. I think there's money pouring in from the enemies of America. I mean, they've already shown a trail coming in from places like Russia and Kazakhstan and how would Donald Trump say it? China. So, you got these millions and millions of dollars coming in to our education system in these institutions of higher learning. You see Karl Marx there in the picture. And that's what they're doing. It's another edge. It's another avenue of approach, as we would say in the military, to defeat an enemy. And make no mistake, we are the enemy of China ideologically, fundamentally. There's no freedoms in China. There's no freedoms in Russia for the common people. There's no freedoms in Iran, Iraq, wherever you go. Even in our brother country, the UK, which we came out of, the monarchy, there's not as much freedom there as there is here. So we got this open border. We got these hundreds of millions of dollars flowing in, not only from these enemies of America, and make no mistake, they're enemies, and our own people, us, the taxpayer, contributing to our own demise.
Yes.
It's incredible. It is absolutely incredible. And then we've got a body of representatives in the House and in the Senate who talk a mean game. And there's no doubt there's some great people there. But what do they get accomplished? All they do is fight with each other, point fingers at each other. Some say they're a Democrat and they actually act like a Republican. Some say they're a Republican and they act like a Democrat. And some of the things that come out of the mouths of these educated people are beyond stupidity. And why can't we just say it like it is? Well, we still can, It's asinine to think that if China's pouring in millions of dollars to some of these Ivy League schools, that it's for anything other than to benefit them. Certainly not to benefit our society. And this anti-Semitism and these pro-Palestinian protests that we're seeing. I saw a guy on top of a flagpole in New York rip down the American flag and put a Palestinian flag on the light pole. And the cops were right there and did nothing. Wow.
Well, that's the beauty of the American flag. I am so happy we are permitted to burn it, to stomp it, to trash it, to throw it in a mud puddle, because that's what freedom is. And it itself is a prima facie example of freedom. It speaks for itself. Every time I see an American flag burn, I see freedom.
Yeah, that's a great point that we don't think about. And I've heard this from people. You and I have discussed it, but I've heard this from business leaders and veteran brothers and sisters that the forces that be, and this is not a conspiracy theory, just follow the money. The forces are using our own strengths against us. And it may have been Khrushchev or was one of them, said that America, it might have been Mao, that America is not going to fall from an outside enemy, but they're going to implode from within. Mm-hmm. And I get this gut feeling that that's where we're at right now. Now, do I think?
Well, that's what Benjamin Franklin meant when he said, "Here's a republic if you can keep it." It takes a lot of work to keep a society free. And it takes a lot of risk to let society be free. Freedom of speech. It's not protection of speech that you like, it's protection of the speech you don't like. So these things are critical to elements to freedom. And as a result, the American system and the Americans themselves are vulnerable to these kinds of attacks by these kinds of enemies. And we've proven time and again to be resilient to withstand these attacks. And we've seen these attacks ever since, actually back to Abe Lincoln, with his tariffs, where the country just began to turn to a dark place. And it started with him. It's carried on by Woodrow Wilson, And it is exemplified by doctors Gay, McGill, and Kornbluth, who showed an amazing lack of understanding of reality in their performance. And it wasn't what they said so much, it's how they said it that really gathered the ire of the viewing audience, me included. The smugness, the idea that one of them Gay, had obviously listened to her lawyers and echoed the sentiment that all of our laws or rules at the university are dependent upon context, which is an asinine statement to be coming out of a PhD from the most elite college in the United States. What a stupid diatribe, what a stupid words to come out of an educated mouth, but they did. But John, I have to reassure the listeners and yourself as you can rest easily, because one of the things that I noticed, one of the influential books that I read as I was growing up, actually is in Vietnam, was Atlas Shrugged. And I wasn't so taken in by the philosophy as I was by the rationale and just the ability of reason to overcome idiocy. And what I saw then and I see now is every time a capitalist institution is taken over by a Marxist or socialist force, those institutions will fail. And they'll fail for the simple reason that Karl Marx did not know how to run a capitalist institution. So,
which is a business, right? Yeah.
business, it's a capitalistic business. And so, all I have to say is rest assured either these universities will fail the poison ivy league, as you point out, of UPenn, MIT, and Harvard. These people will fail miserably. UPenn has already, McGill from UPenn has already resigned in disgrace. The Gay from the University of Harvard,
The plagiarist, she's a plagiarist.
as it turns out, plagiarized a good portion of her PhD thesis. And this is the type of person, this is a perfect example that they don't see the problem with a plagiarist running a university. To them, everything's fine. Well, it's not fine, and it's against the laws of nature and the laws of reality and the laws of physics. And rest assured, these three people will fail and fail miserably.
Yeah, some great points you raised there too, Dan. And one thing that I've been starting to hear recently is this thing called the social media effect, where everybody gets their sound bites and their news and their information off of these social media platforms. And it brings to mind two of them. Facebook, which everybody knows, which was still continues to censor. Everybody is not allowed free reign there. And Twitter with Jack Dorsey, who Elon Musk bought Twitter, now it's called X. But it was well known, and it's been found out that they were silencing voices on there that had a conservative view or a view that went against the collective narrative, the collectivist narrative. And come to find out that there were ex CIA and ex FBI people on their boards. You know, Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey, they got snookered, and or maybe they were in on it too. Who knows? Well, you know, when the money starts flowing, people will sell their souls to the devil. And if you're getting all of your news off of a social media and you're getting hyped up because of it, you need to check yourself. That's that social media effect, because most of that, I would say a good portion of that, is filtered somehow. And we don't know if those are good forces, we can tell, or if they're bad forces. And they're bad forces if they censor you or ridicule you or silence you. And what I think we're seeing too on a mass scale, not just in America, but globally, is the proliferation of mental illnesses beyond anything we've ever seen. when it's okay to be fat and obese and we revere that, or it's okay to be a transgender and we revere that, there's some serious issues going on in a society, because it was documented for decades that stuff like that comes out of some type of a mental illness or a trauma or something. And now we're saying it's okay. I can be born with a vagina and say that I'm a male, or something's just wrong with that. It goes against all the rules of science, which is what's going on in these institutions of higher learning. They're headed down a one way, they're like runaway trains heading for some type of a cliff. And it's just very extraordinary to see and to be in the mix of it, to watch it happening before our very eyes. Incredible. And of course, that opens up cans of worms for a lot of other stuff. Listen to this guy. He's a conspiracy theorist. I only know what I see. And if we don't go with our gut feeling, which is what the universe or God has given us, that intuition that we've been blessed with to know when something's not right, pro-Hamas protests are not right. And if you hear the word oppressors, you know automatically you're dealing with Marxists. It's pretty simple to me.
Right. You're not dealing with reason any longer. You're dealing with the emotions of perceived fairness. And I use the word perceived because they certainly are. They do vary from individual to individual by a great deal. Hence the problem.
Hence the problem. So I'm very grateful for my own parents who who worked to get to where they were at. My grandfather on my dad's side didn't even speak English, but they taught me some things. They taught me that work ethic would get you places. They taught me that America was a place worth fighting for, that without America, that my family lineage would have never had the opportunities. And believe me, when our farms were destroyed on my mother's side during the Civil War, they didn't ask for reparations. They never, it was hard to come back after they destroyed your farms and your lands and all that, but they never asked for anything. They worked hard and they got back to a certain level of dignity. And the question I would ask is, what level of dignity do you operate in? Or do you just want everybody to do everything for you? Because if you do, you're not going anywhere.
Well, that's if I were to say, what did I see with testimony of those three professors? I would say they lacked dignity. There was no dignity whatsoever of anything that came out of their mouth, and it should have been. The irony is, it should have been replete with dignity coming from those mouths, those voices.
That's a great point, Dan. And so the question that, if you're still listening to Dan and me, and the question would be, when you look at yourself in the mirror, what level of dignity do you operate out of? Do you operate at a low vibrational state and you want the path of least resistance? Or do you operate from a higher standard with more dignity and realize that some things in life are worth fighting for? And dignity is one of them. So, any solutions, Dan, other than asking yourself to start at the individual level and do the right thing?
Patience, perseverance, keep the faith. This will triumph. We will triumph over the forces of darkness and socialism. So that's be patient, become involved. Make sure that when you have an opportunity for your voice to be heard, you allow it to be heard, and keep the faith.
Well, there you have it. Keep the faith, have some dignity, be involved, use the gifts that you've been blessed with. We thank everybody for listening again, and may God bless America. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Time of the Reason podcast show. Now it's time to think. Logic and reason work. It's only common sense. Do your part.